Hello everyone, my name is Anthony Traurig. I am a legal analyst at CBD-Intel, where we provide regulatory and market intelligence for the CBD sector. And I first want to thank CBD White Label Expo for allowing me to give this presentation to you today. It's a topic that has been very polarizing and a bit controversial in the CBD sector for the last year or 2 years now. So it's my privilege to present to you some of my analysis that I've done on Delta-8 THC regulations in the United States. I say that it's controversial because reasonable minds can and do disagree on its legality. So I want to present some of my data and some of my analysis to you. And what we'll cover today, first we'll cover what is Delta-8 THC, and that's important to the analysis. A few key points that I will make will turn out to be quite crucial to the legal analysis. So we'll talk about what exactly it is, what federal law there is out there, and what its status is under federal law. We'll briefly touch on some state-by-state analysis, and talk about some trends that I have seen in tracking this issue across the U.S. And what the future may hold for this cannabinoid. So first of all, what is Delta-8? Delta-8 is an intoxicating cannabinoid. It is an isomer of CBD and Delta-9 THC. Now, this is critical to the analysis of understanding what an isomer is. And I like to think of it, I'm no scientist, but I like to think of it as two compounds that have the same ingredients, if you will. But they do have different chemical structures, which then affect what types of effects it can have and how it interacts with your CB1 and CB2 receptors in your brain. So another key point is that Delta-8 THC does naturally occur, but only in very small amounts in the cannabis plant and in even smaller quantities in hemp plants. Now, because it is so in such scant quantity in the plant, it is not commercially viable to just extract Delta-8 THC from a hemp plant like you might do with CBD. So how it is most commonly produced in products that you may see on the markets all across the states is through converting hemp-derived CBD through a process called isomerization. I won't bore you with the details of that, but suffice it to say that it is typically made by taking hemp-derived CBD, passing it through some sort of acid, an acid film, which then converts the CBD into Delta-8 THC. Now, to talk about federal law, we'll start with the most broad view and kind of narrow it down. Whenever we're talking about Delta-8 THC, you've got to start with the 2018 Farm Bill. And why it is critical is, as you will see in the later slides, my analysis is that it all comes down to whether Delta-8 THC fits the Farm Bill definition of hemp. And that will tell you whether it is legal under federal law as it stands. Now what we have here is the Farm Bill definition of hemp, which is the plant cannabis sativa L and any part of that plant, including the seeds thereof, and all derivatives, extracts, cannabinoids, isomers, acids, salts of isomers, whether growing or not, with a Delta-9 THC concentration of not more than 0.3% on a dry weight basis. Now you see that I have a few words there highlighted because they are important. It does not just include the plant itself, but all derivatives, cannabinoids, and isomers. And you also notice that it only limits the Delta-9 THC concentration, not Delta-8. So, arguably, whenever you are converting hemp-derived CBD into Delta-8, that could be also a derivative of hemp. And as I mentioned, it is a naturally occurring cannabinoid in hemp. Now, typically that, as I said, that is not how it is produced for commercial products, but nonetheless, it is a naturally occurring cannabinoid in hemp. So arguably, Delta-8 THC could fit this definition as a derivative or cannabinoid, but where I feel most strongly that it does fit is as an isomer. As I mentioned, it is an isomer of CBD and Delta-9 THC. So clearly, whenever the drafters of the Farm Bill were crafting this language, they had isomers of these compounds, of these other cannabinoids in mind, and legalized them. So in my analysis, I do believe that Delta-8 THC fits the Farm Bill definition as an isomer of hemp. Now, why that's crucially important is we have to look at the Controlled Substances Act. And the Controlled Substances Act does list as a Schedule I drug THCs. And I've listed the verbatim definition here that is in the Controlled Substances Act. But I want to highlight a couple of things. You will see in italics there that it specifically excludes what is in paragraph D31II of this section. Well, if you go down there, it says that tetrahydrocannabinols does not include any material, compound, mixture, or preparation that falls within the definition of hemp set forth in the Farm Bill, which we just went over. So therefore, if it meets the Farm Bill definition of hemp, it is not a controlled substance under this definition of THCs. Now, some people say to me, well, Anthony, if that's the case, what about the Federal Analog Act? Now, what that is, and I've listed the definition here that they provide for controlled substance analogs, but the gist of it is that anything that has the same chemical structure or substantially similar chemical structure to a controlled substance, or that has similar psychological or psychotropic effects to a Schedule I or II drug, is a federal analog and therefore is illegal as a Schedule I or II drug itself. Now, this is a fairly technical argument, and I won't get into the weeds of it, no pun intended, but suffice it to say that if hemp is not a Schedule I drug, then an analog should not be either. In fact, many of the cannabinoids that are present in the cannabis plant are very chemically similar in structure. So I do not think that that was intended. Clearly, the government intended to legalize all cannabinoids in hemp, with the exception of Delta-9 THC up to 0.3%. And also this second prong of being substantially similar in effect. I do think that there need to be many more findings. We are not exactly clear how substantially similar it is in effect to Delta-9 THC. We do know that it's intoxicating, but I do think that more would need to be done to study this compound before we could come to any conclusion about that. So suffice it to say, I do not think that it falls within the Federal Analog Act. Now, I said reasonable minds can disagree on this topic, and the DEA has released an interim rule that does not mention Delta-8 THC by name, but it does seem pretty clear in addressing this subject. What it says, the crux of it is that they say that the Farm Bill does not impact the control status of synthetically derived THCs, and that the concentration of Delta-9 THC is not a determining factor in whether a material is a controlled substance, that all synthetically derived THCs remain Schedule I controlled substances. Now, as I mentioned, it does not talk about THC by name anywhere in this rule, nor does it define what is synthetically derived THC. As I talked about the process for converting CBD into Delta-8 THC, you're not completely producing this compound out of nowhere. It is being derived from a cannabinoid in hemp. So it is not clear if that would meet the definition of synthetically derived THC, or if it is some quasi status, but that term just has not not been defined in the DEA rule. Now that rule is under consideration. The comment period is over, but the DEA is still evaluating all comments before they issue any final rule. Now, let's talk about the FDA. Their stance, as you can see from the slides, has been crickets so far. They have not released any statement or policy guidance on Delta-8 THC products. And importantly, they have not issued any warning letters to companies who are putting these products out there in the marketplace. So the FDA has not taken any stance on Delta-8 yet, but that could change any day. Now let's just quickly talk about state-by-state analysis. Here's just a screenshot of the map that we have up on our website at CBD-Intel.com, and where our subscribers can see our trackers. This is the one that we have for Delta-8 THC. As you can see, the states that are in red have, in some form or fashion, prohibited Delta-8 THC products. The states in green have not done so. And then the ones in yellow, it is not clear what their stance is. Now on our website, you would be able to scroll over any of these states, and it would give you a breakdown of exactly what the law is in each of those states on Delta-8 THC. I won't talk about every state by any means, but I do just want to focus on a few trends that we have seen in tracking this issue in the U.S. One is we are seeing states that are including THC isomers like Delta-8 in its total THC calculation for hemp via legislation passed by the legislature. So what they're doing, many states like North Dakota are saying we are going to include Delta-8 in that total calculation of 0.3%. So therefore, the sum of Delta-8, Delta-9, Delta-10 THC would all have to be total within that 0.3% range, which then essentially would destroy any market for any products that have Delta-8 in them. Another route that some states have taken has been that state regulatory agencies are taking stances against it. Kentucky Department of Agriculture, for example, has done this, but is basically not waiting on the legislature to do anything, but states who are releasing interpretations of the law as it stands. I would just like to point out that there has been no state that has come out and said, yes, this is perfectly fine, we are okay with Delta-8 THC products being sold widely and unregulated. There was a bill in Florida that did seek to regulate Delta-8 THC products somewhat like hemp products or CBD products, but that bill failed a few months ago. Another interesting wrinkle is looking at how states that allow recreational cannabis are handling Delta-8 THC. Some states like Connecticut just recently came out and said that they will only allow Delta-8 THC products to be sold through state dispensaries. Oregon is another state that is looking to do something similar. They have passed a bill to do something similar that would channel all Delta-8 THC products through the state system and not be just available at convenience stores and wherever they may be, as we're seeing all across the states now. So, the future of Delta-8 THC. I do believe that we will see states continuing to limit access to Delta-8, but as we are now seeing, there was some initial backlash from these products being everywhere and being unregulated. But we're seeing some regulations that are at least leaving open the potential for some legal channels. Like I mentioned, Connecticut is looking to do that. But what some states are doing is allowing their regulatory agencies to take a look at this substance and to determine, for example, whether it has potentially harmful effects and make findings that would at least allow that regulatory agency to allow legal channels for the sale of Delta-8 products, and not completely just outright banning it and closing all potential legal pathways. Another thing that will have a strong impact, as I mentioned before, on the future of Delta-8 is the DEA's final rule. Where will they draw the line? We talked about synthetically produced cannabinoids and THCs. How will they define that, and how will they define what is naturally occurring? Because anyone in this industry knows that cannabinoids are very commonly converted one from another, most commonly from their acid forms to their subsequent forms through decarboxylation. But will the DEA, if they are inclined, will they draw a line that does not contradict the Farm Bill's legalization of hemp isomers and derivatives? It's a tricky line to draw because, as I mentioned, decarboxylation is clearly anticipated and even discussed to some extent in the Farm Bill. Will they be able to draw that line without contradicting other parts of the Farm Bill? And as I say here, the future of Delta-8 THC is much more than about just one cannabinoid. There are over 150 cannabinoids in the cannabis plant, and where we draw the lines with Delta-8 THC could have significant impact on minor cannabinoids down the road. I can assure you that Delta-8 will not be the last controversial cannabinoid that is discovered, as we are just really, have seen the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the potential of the cannabis plant. I will just leave you with that thought that where these lines are drawn when it comes to Delta-8 could be very impactful and hopefully will be well thought out by regulators so that we can realize the full potential of the cannabis plant going forward. Thank you all very much for listening, and if you would like to check out any more of our information on Delta-8 THC or any other topics, you can visit us at www.cbd-intel.com. Thank you very much.